Good morning, church, and happy August. We made it to here. Congratulations. You may be sitting there wondering, gosh, every week I tune in and Gary's hair stays the same length. How does he do it? The magic of television. And through the magic of television, we can say hello to folks over in the comments section. We want you to know that we are glad you're here with us this morning.
Hello, church. This is Mary Ann. I just really appreciate all of you that reached out to me during this time of my sorrow. It's just unexplainable, the pain that I'm feeling. I feel almost sick with the grief, but I do know that they both know the Lord and they're in heaven, but I still miss him terribly, and without my faith I couldn't have made it through this time. And I really can't wait till we all get to go back to church, and you know, the sermons on Sunday online, at least, you know, I feel a connection, and all that you said hello and all that I saw on this Sunday was really, I really enjoyed that. I'm sitting there just smiling by myself. So I love you all and hope we get to go to church and get hugs soon.
What she said.
Hi, church family. Happy Sunday from Austin, Texas. Hope everyone is staying safe and healthy during these times. And I look forward to seeing us all together again one day. God bless.
Hi, everybody. Long time it's been. I really appreciated all the videos we saw last Sunday to see old friends. It kind of tears you up sometimes. So I'll make this short before I tear up, but we've missed you, and I'll look forward to seeing everybody when we can get back together.
I'm Philip, and I'm glad to be here. I wish I could be here for Sunday morning, but I have to catch it from home. I hope everyone is staying well and keeping cool.
Turned into wine, open the eyes of the blind. There's no one like you, none like you. Into the darkness you shine, out of the ashes we rise. There's no stronger. God, you are higher than any other. Our God is healer, awesome in power. Our God, our God. Into the darkness you shine, and out of the ashes we rise. There's no healer, awesome in power. is for us, then who could ever stop us? And if our God is with us, then what could stand against? And if our God is for us, then who could ever stop us? And if our God is with us, then what could stand against? What could stand against? Our God is greater, our God is stronger. God, you are higher than any other. Our God is healer, awesome in power. Our God, our God, our God. Our God is greater, our God is stronger. God, you are higher than any other. Our God is healer, awesome in power. Our God, our God. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found, was blind, but now I see. 'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fears relieved. How precious did that grace appear the hour I first believed. Through many dangers, toils, and snares, I have already come. 'Tis grace hath brought me safe thus far, and grace will lead me home.
Hi, church. Hey, before Josh comes and brings our first message in a new series today called Summer Playlist, which we're all looking forward to, I want to invite you to stick around today after the service, after the blessing. We want to begin to bring you up to speed with short videos, 5 minutes or less, a couple of times a month, even maybe weekly, around the merger possibility conversations that we are having with New Hope Community Church. So stick around. Again, I hope you enjoyed this morning hearing some greetings and some hellos from those familiar faces. I heard such good responses from showing so many of you saying hello last week. Help us out. We would love to hear from anybody who has not yet sent a video in. We invite you to do so. You'll see the address where you can send that on screen now. So we'll enjoy Josh. I know you will, and I'll see you after service. Bye.
Well, church, here we are, the first Sunday of August, still holding worship in this way, virtually. The last 5 months, 5 months have been challenging for us all. We're all experiencing life in the same way to some degree in relation to the coronavirus. And can I just say how wonderful it was to see everyone's welcomes and intros last week that they had submitted. It was honestly for me one of the highlights of my week. But after we saw all of those welcomes and intros, we concluded our series of the book of Philippians last Sunday. And I'm sure that if you followed us through the whole way, that it was at least one thing that could lift you up in these different and difficult times. The book of Philippians is just too rich to not gain anything from. So, where do we go from here? How are we supposed to follow that series up? How are we supposed to follow up such a rich series? Well, next our preaching staff are going to try to lift you up in a different way. This new series is called Summer Playlist. Last winter, when our preaching staff sat down to map out the year of 2020 and what sermons would be preached when, we heard this idea from another church and it just sounded too good to pass up. So we hope that this series is as much fun for you as it is for us. The concept behind this series is that even in music, movies, and works of literature that do not fall under the Christian genre, there's still room for God to speak to all of us through those. So get ready, because in this sermon series, we'll be taking a look at some works that are not Christian. Now, if that puts you in an uncomfortable spot, I ask that you would remember with me our very first sermon series that we started this year with, where we opened ourselves up to the ways that people of different perspectives from ourselves read and can interpret the scriptures. I actually revisited and listened to some of those sermons again, and there was something that Pastor Brian said in his message titled "Through the Eyes of a Non-Believer" that caught my attention, and I think it's something we can hold on to and may help us in this series as well. One of the things Pastor Brian said at the beginning of his message was, because we as believers believe in living a godly life, we sometimes get a little complacent in thinking that others who don't behave like us really should kind of stay over there sometimes. And what ends up happening is that people who aren't in the dominant culture end up feeling like the Bible isn't actually for them, but it's against them. And with this in mind, I would say that as we who believe in living a godly life can sometimes use the label Christian in a way that hurts what we hope to accomplish rather than help our own cause. And the best example I can think of in my own life where I saw this was when I started to go to youth groups when I was in high school, about 15 years old. You'll hear more about it later, but after I started to go to a youth group, I actually found 3 different groups to attend. And one of those groups, the teachings and the way that they encouraged the teens there, they placed such a strong emphasis in listening to things that are Christian. So much so that it felt shameful if you listened or engaged with things that were not Christian. And so eventually, as I became more a part of that group, I wanted to invite others to this group along with me. And when I extended that invitation, I was actually turned down because they knew of that type of culture at the church, and they felt turned off from it. And so sometimes I feel when we place this Christian label on something and we elevate it so much higher than things that are labeled secular, we can lose our opportunity to speak into the lives of those we hope to ultimately reach for the sake of the gospel. And now I think Paul knew this all too well. Throughout our previous series of Philippians, I was reading through a book called The Paul Quest, written by Ben Witherington III. And I was reading through it to help myself get a better picture of who Paul was. Who was the person who was writing this letter that we are walking through the last 8 weeks? Paul was a complicated man simply in his identity alone. He was a Roman citizen, he was a Jewish Pharisee, and eventually he was a Christian. He was a very well-educated man with the skills of speaking and writing, and also possessed the skills to be a tent maker. Now, Paul utilized all of these things in his ministry so that he might win some. Witherington III in the Paul Quest put it this way: Paul believed in sifting culture, not merely criticizing it. His faith was not world negating, but world transforming. His model was an aggressive approach aiming to take every thought captive for Christ. But Paul said it himself, too. Though I am free and belong to no one, I have made myself a slave to everyone, to win as many as possible. I have become all things to all people, so that by all possible means I might save some. I do all this for the sake of the gospel, that I may share in its blessing. That comes from 1 Corinthians 9, and it's verses 19 and 22-23. You see, Paul is like a chameleon when it came to engaging with others. And all of his efforts were put forward so that he could see some, at least some, experience the goodness of the gospel. And then this summer playlist series could challenge us to do the same. It could challenge us to engage with things that are labeled secular and see how God could speak to us and others through them. Now, it was really hard for me to pick just one thing to talk with you on this topic. So I thought I would compose my own personal summer read/watch/playlist. There are so many books, movies, and songs that I could see something tie into a Christian teaching, and I wanted to share those with you. So without further ado, here is Josh's summer read/watch/playlist, and each one's connection that I see to Christianity. The first one I have is in a book that I've been reading for a long while. It's one of 5 books I think I'm in the middle of right now. It's called Eldest. It is the second book in the Eragon series. And as I was reading through it recently, there was a chapter in there that there was an argument between the dragon rider who is destined to save so many people from an evil tyrant of a king. And he was sparring to better his sword fighting with an elf. Now, the elf was so much better than him just because he was an elf in swordplay. And so there came this argument and this from the elf to Eragon, who is a human, and the fact that the elf believed that Eragon was not qualified. He was the worst possible option to be put upon this path to save so many people. And I see that, and I think of so many other stories in Scripture where God uses the smallest, God uses the weakest, and God uses the most unlikely for his plan that he has for people. And so that is where I saw a Christian teaching in the book of Eldest. The next one I have comes from the Harry Potter series. All 7 books, I believe there is such a strong theme that you can read from the very beginning to the very end and see this theme of love and its power to overcome evil, to overcome fear and to overcome hatred. You may not be able to see it at the very beginning, but once you get to the end of the entire series, you can look back and see how it is a thread that is woven from start to finish. And if 4,100 pages is too much to read through, maybe about 20 hours of film could be something you can whet your appetite to. So may you consider the Harry Potter series. The next I have on my playlist comes from probably my favorite Disney film, The Emperor's New Groove. Now, the reason I included this one as I watched it recently is I saw the character Pacha, and I saw such a clear demonstration of what it looks like to love your enemy. I'll just leave it at that, and I will say it's one of my favorites, so you should give it a try. The next one, I don't have anything like tangible that I can hold in front of me, so hopefully Steve can get like an image down here or something. From Nickelodeon's Avatar: The Last Airbender. At the very end of the entire series, there are two lessons I can see in this. The first one that you see in the leading up to the very end of the entire show, there is a value of forgiveness and choosing forgiveness over revenge and wrath. And I think that's something that goes hand in hand so well with what you can see in these scriptures. The second thing that I saw in it as I watched this series on Netflix recently throughout this pandemic is in the characters of Zuko and his uncle Iroh, that those two have a narrative arc that resemble the parable of the prodigal son in such a strong way. So if you would give Avatar: The Last Airbender a shot, you would also make me happy because it was one of my favorite cartoons growing up. The next thing I have on my watch list, is Marvel's Thor Ragnarok, the third in the trilogy. This movie, I feel like it gives us a good thing that we can relate to right now. Towards the end of the film, Thor is having a conversation through a vision with his father Odin as he's panicking of Asgard, his home city, being destroyed, being taken away from his world. And as Thor speaks to Odin, Odin responds to him in saying, Asgard is not a place. It never was. Asgard is where our people stand. And I hear that, and I hear the message, I hear that and I see the picture of the church, especially in these times as we're not meeting here in the sanctuary. As I look out and see all of these pews empty and I'm speaking to a camera, I can say that the church is still there. The church is where the people are. So that is Thor Ragnarok. The last three things I have are songs. First song is by Angels and Airwaves, and it's a song called Secret Crowds. The lyrics of this song go, if I had my own world, there'd be no more wars, death, or riots. There'd be no more police, packed parking lots, guns, bombs sounding off. And it goes on and on and on like that, and eventually it comes to the point where the lyrics say, if I had my own world, I'd build you an empire from here to the far lands to spread love like violence. I hear that and I think Jesus would be all for spreading love like violence spreads in today's world. The second song I have is 21 Pilots, Holding On to You. Now this song, it's like a story, and it speaks of a person who is struggling with their thoughts, with the negativity and the way that their thoughts just beat them down, beat them up. And in all of that, the lyrics speak of finding something to hold on to in this battle. And the title reveals holding on to you. There's a person that the lyrics say they're holding on to in this battle. And I think you can make sense of who the you can be made out to be. Now, the last song is the one that I'll be walking with you through for this message. It's by an artist called Marshmello, featuring a band called A Day to Remember. And for your listening pleasure and sheer entertainment, I would like to share with you the song Rescue Me.
Never been saved, but I'll never come closer. Another year down and another year older. A million fresh starts, what I needed was closure. Yeah, I lost who I was, but I found my composure. Yeah, when I found you, I found me. Nothing around far as I could see. You were the current that
Well, I hope you enjoyed the show. The reason that this song is the one that I wish to walk through with you today is because I listen to the lyrics and I hear so much of my own spiritual journey in it. The theme of this song is that there's a person who is lost and in need of saving, thus the title, Rescue Me. Now, this song could be telling a story of a person who is literally lost and stranded on an island like the actual music video portrays, or it could possibly be telling a story of a person who is lost in life emotionally, relationally, possibly spiritually. And it's that exact part where I see the connection to my own spiritual journey. And I need to share a little bit more about myself and my story so that you can see the theme of this song and where it connects with my life. I've shared with many of you that I started going to a Catholic church growing up, and I stopped when I was about 6th grade. This began a period of time where I would say it was the most difficult in my life. You see, my motivation for leaving church at that time was I was simply tired of being told what to do. I was tired of being told what I could and couldn't do. Up to that point, I had gone to Mass with my sister and my mom, whining and complaining most days. But I had reached the point where I was just done. I was done doing it. I felt like I was the classic example of the teenager that thought they knew what was best. I was walking into my teenage years with the mindset that I was done listening to others, done listening to what they told me to do, and I was ready to give life a go on my own and be my own person. Little did I know that as I was doing this, I was choosing something that would haunt me for quite some time. One of the consequences of walking away from church at that point in my life was I had just then cut off all of my friends that I had had for such a long time. I had cut off so much of my community that I knew, and I didn't even know I was doing it. At the same time, I was transitioning to junior high. Now, middle school is a scary, difficult time for most teenagers. First of all, it's one of the most awkward times in anyone's life. And secondly, you start to go to school with so many other people that you might not even know, and your schedule changes so much, you're just thrown into so many unknowns that life becomes a little scary. And while I was thrown into that, I felt like I was walking around my school and I was never really accepted for who I was by so many people. I felt like I could count those people on one hand. My experience in middle school came to be a time where I focused on my schoolwork, and I never really felt like I had many friends throughout that time. It was a time in my life where I felt alone and so distant from so many people, even though I was just walking through the halls of so many other people around me. Now, my life at home didn't come to fare any different. With my conceited and stubborn mindset, I distanced myself from my parents and my sister as well. While I felt isolated at school, I allowed it to manifest itself at home as well. And I want to be clear in communicating at this point that I look at this stage in my life and I don't blame my family or my sister or my parents for this. Instead, I see it as a distance that I brought about myself. It was a time in my life where I felt stuck, stranded, and alone. My world felt like it was just me and my thoughts at that point, and that's never anything good for people who feel lonely and depressed. The combination of those things and sitting with my thoughts too long brought me to the point several times of wondering, if this is what life is like, what's the point? Why even go on? And it brought me to the point of contemplating suicide several times. I was in need of help, but I had no idea where it was going to come from. I had no idea what it was even going to look like. It turned out that help actually came through one of those few people at school I felt accepted me for who I was. Remember how I said I could count those people on one hand? It was one of those people just sent me an invitation, extended an invitation to come to their church's youth group. This was during my freshman year of high school. Now, when I had that invitation extended to me, I thought about it and remembered my past experience in church, and I was very hesitant in going because I felt like church was a place that people would just tell you what to do, what you couldn't do. It felt like a place full of rules, and that was not really what I wanted to get involved in. But after thinking about it even longer, I considered it because I felt like I had nothing better to do with my time. And so I figured, why not give it a shot? So reluctantly, I went to that youth group, and as I stepped into the group, it really surprised me that first night that I was accepted like I had been a part of that group for the longest time. It was the first time that I felt accepted like that, probably in my life. And so for that reason, I continued to go back to the group again and again, and I continued to get to know the people in that group. And as I felt connected to the group more and more, my depression and feelings of loneliness lifted and left. Now, unfortunately, after I started to attend this group, the youth leader stepped away from the position and the group ceased to even exist. I found myself yearning for that type of community again. And so eventually I found 3 different youth groups to go to. One of them met on Sunday nights and the other 2 met on Wednesdays, and I would go one week to one and the next week I would go to the other. And my reason for going to the groups was exclusively to be with friends. It was just to hang out with people, to feel that sense of love and acceptance that I felt from that first group I went to. And it took me a good deal of time to get there, but eventually I started to pay close attention to the lessons that were taught by the leaders. And eventually, when I started to listen to and catch on for what was being taught, I realized that before I started going to that very first youth group, that thing that I was searching for and wanting, it was really God that I was looking for. I look at that time in my life and I believe that God knew I was searching for some form of acceptance. When I went to the youth groups, I felt some kind of love and acceptance through others. It just took me a while to realize and actually listen and pay attention to the teachings that showed me that it was actually God through those people, through those groups, that I would experience love, true love and acceptance, and unconditional love and acceptance. And so that's my story. If you think back to the lyrics of Rescue Me, you can probably already see why it resonates with me so. Some of the lyrics that stand out are the ones in the second verse and in the chorus. The lyrics of the second verse say, "We're way too young to be feeling this hopeless. You were my light in this endless ocean." Now, for many of us, it could be so hard to imagine that kids so young, that so many kids can hit rock bottom at such a young age. But that was where I felt, and I know so many other people have similar feelings. Feeling lost, feeling like the song says, young and hopeless. But there is help. The next line of the song say, "You were my light in this endless ocean." In my personal story, I can say confidently that light was the unconditional love of God. It wasn't the acceptance and love from people that's conditional. No, it was the unconditional love that comes only from God. The lyrics of the chorus have a bit of a similar meaning. When I found you, I found me. Nothing around as far as I could see. You were the current that carried me. When I found you, I found me. Lines in the sand only you can read. My SOS, yeah, you rescued me. I said before, I discovered what the love of God was. I knew that I needed something. I was missing something in my life. I felt stuck. Nothing around far as I could see, as the song puts it. I knew that I had to call out for something. There was something in me that knew I was powerless, I was helpless, and I needed help from something outside of me. And without ever having the strength to voice that, I believe God heard my SOS and carried me through the worst of it all before I even recognized that it was Him. You were the current that carried me. Lines in the sand only you can read. My SOS, yeah, you rescued me. And now that I've shared this song with you and the value that I find in its lyrics, you can maybe think, that's a pretty powerful story. That's a pretty cool story, and I don't have the same experience, Josh, so what am I supposed to gain from this? And I would say that if my story says anything about the nature of God at all, it's that God hears those who feel they aren't heard, and God sees those who believe they aren't seen. And there are two places in Scripture that I think of immediately for this, and this is where I'm going to finish. The first of these two stories is Exodus 3, a story that most of us probably know well when God spoke to Moses through the burning bush. Verses 7 and 8, God speaks to Moses saying, "I have certainly seen the oppression of my people in Egypt. I have heard their cries of distress because of their harsh slave drivers. Yes, I am aware of their suffering. So I have come down to rescue them from the power of the Egyptians and lead them out of Egypt into their own fertile and spacious land." God told Moses he had heard the cries of the Hebrew slaves in Egypt. God saw the oppression they were experiencing. Now that is something that should give everyone hope today. And I think specifically of Black people who have been crying out to be heard since the age of imperialism and colonialism. Maybe there can be some hope in the fact that if we don't listen to the voices of the oppressed, that the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob is the God who listens to the cries of the oppressed. God hears the cries of those who feel they aren't heard. Now, the second passage of Scripture I want to walk through very quickly is Genesis 16. It's the story of Hagar and her relation to Sarai and Abram. Now, Hagar was the servant of Sarai, who is the wife of Abram. Sarai was unable to have children, and so she sought to have children through her servant Hagar. Hagar would become pregnant. Sarai became jealous of Hagar because of that. So jealous that she treated Hagar so harshly and with contempt to the point where it forced Hagar to run away from the shelter of Abram's household. And while she was running away, pregnant and in the wilderness, the messenger of the Lord comforted her. And Genesis 16, verses 10 and 11, the messenger speaks to her. I will give you more descendants than you can count. You are now pregnant and will give birth to a son. You are to name him Ishmael, which means God hears, for the Lord has heard your cry of distress. Something so powerful and exactly what Hagar felt she didn't have at all. And so that changes Hagar's response and who she recognized this God to be. In verse 13, it says, therefore Hagar used another name to refer to the Lord who had spoken to her. She said, you are the God who sees me. Have I truly seen the one who sees me? I listened to these two stories this time around, and I think it's pretty amazing how they speak of our God. You see, in Exodus 3, God hears the cries of the oppressed Hebrew people by the Egyptians. And in Genesis 16, God hears the cry of and sees the chaotic situation of Hagar, an Egyptian servant of the matriarch of the people who are being oppressed in Exodus 3. God hears those who feel they aren't heard, and sees those who believe they aren't seen. And so no matter where you find yourself today during this global pandemic, I hope that that is something you can trust in. If you're separated from loved ones and other members of your community, know that God sees you in the same way that he saw Hagar. If you're walking through life and feel that no one takes the time to listen to the hardships that you're going through, know that God doesn't only hear what you're saying, but God takes the time to listen. Our God is a God who hears all people in all places at all times who feel they aren't heard. And our God is a God who sees all people in all places at all times who believe they aren't seen.
Calling and calling, nobody home. It feels like I'm falling alone. Out on an island, SOS on the beach, watching your plane pass over me. How could you miss me with my hands in the air. I thought you were listening. I thought you'd be there. Where were you when I had no one to turn to? Where were you when my worst fears were coming true? Where were you? I thought you'd come to my rescue. Where were you? Oh. One set of footprints on this path I've been on, but you say you've been here all along. Oh, if you really love me like nobody else, then why was I walking through hell? How could you miss me with my hands in the air? I thought you were listening. Oh, I thought you'd be there. Where were you when I had no one to turn to? Where were you when my worst fears were coming true? Where were you? I thought you'd come to my rescue. When my prayers bounced off the ceiling, I was facing down my demons. When my legs gave out beneath me and I fell into your arms. Where were you when I had no one to turn to? You carried me through on your shoulders, black and blue. I never knew the footprints in the sand were you. They were you. One set of footprints on this path I've been on. Now I know they were yours all along.
I want to thank Josh for bringing the message to us this morning. And before you go, two things. I want to offer you the blessing, and then I invite you again. Stick around if you'd like a 5-minute update. But here, let me send you with these words. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord turn his face toward you and be gracious unto you. May the Lord turn his face to you and give you peace. Shalom. Hi, everyone. Thanks for watching this video update on the merger conversation that we are having with New Hope Community Church. We've been giving brief updates through Monday Musings, but want to expand on those updates. Stuart and I will be giving short video chats, either a couple of times a month or perhaps even weekly going forward. Leadership from both churches, their staff, the boards, and our merger team are using a book entitled Better Together. It is a practical guide on church mergers, looking at many church mergers that have happened through the last decade. Why reinvent the wheel, right? So we have adopted this book. We're looking at it and learning from it. It's been such a good guide for us. The word merger conjures up all kinds of images. In the book, Better Together, they really just discuss 4 types of church mergers. They're helpful to understanding. We're going to put these up on the screen for you. The first is they talk about a rebirth merger. This is when a struggling or dying church gets a second life by being restarted under a stronger, vibrant, and typically larger church. That's one model. A second model is adoption mergers. A stable church that is integrated under the vision of a stronger, vibrant, and typically larger church. A third type of merger is called marriage merger. Two churches, both strong or growing, and can realign with each other under a united vision and new leadership configuration is called a marriage merger. And then the final one is called an ICU, intensive care unit merger, where two churches that know they're in trouble and try to turn around their critical situation, but are more survival driven than vision and often fail. As our leadership teams dove into the book, we quickly saw that the model that most closely represents where our two congregations are is the adoption model, with New Hope adopting Mount Scott Church. New Hope averages 800 people on a Sunday morning, prior to COVID, of course, and they have experienced growth over the last 2 years. Mount Scott, we average about 180 people on a Sunday, and we have seen steady decline over the last 2 decades. Adoption is something I'm pretty familiar with. My only sibling, an older brother, was adopted, and my husband Fred and his sister were both adopted as well. Let me talk just for a moment about the benefits of a healthy family adoption. See if you see some correlations. One, someone at risk is given the opportunity for a better life. 2, excitement and synergy abounds in the family unit adopting that new life. The family is growing through adoption, and it is celebrating. So it is a celebration of love and care extended to another. 3, resources and support increase for the one being adopted. But also, this new life brings a wealth of joy and gifts to the family. Let me share excerpts from a paragraph in our book about the adoption model. Adoption mergers are not for desperate churches in danger of immediate extinction. Adoptees recognize that their church's mission will be better fulfilled by submitting their name, their ministries, and their assets to a church that can multiply its impact beyond what it could do remaining solo. The adopted church brings something to the table in addition to a congregation of people, facilities, staff, and ministry programs that are often integrated into the lead church's overall strategy. Those of us in the thick of this conversation would admit to you that we've had some hard swallows as we seek God and as we wrestle with our reality. It is humbling to be the smaller kid on the block. But you know what? Mount Scott Church is stable. And we've done some pretty significant ministry here in our neighborhood over the last 4 years. I know because we've been told by our neighbors that they would really miss us if this church ever disappeared. At the same time, we recognize that to maintain ministry in this location and keep doing what we have begun doing, we're going to need to share our resources, come together, and be good steward of all the gifts that we have here at Mount Scott and that New Hope has as well. And this merger feels like a kingdom approach to kingdom life. I hope that this little blurb has been helpful and informative to bring you up to speed where we are on the conversation. Could I invite you to please pray into this? Stay in touch with us. Be hopeful and courageous as we continue to pray what we have prayed for years, that God's will be done. For his is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever and ever. Amen.